So this week we were at the Financial Services Operational Resilience Conference in London. It brought together a large number of players within the financial services industry to talk about a really important topic, which is operational resilience post the March 2025 deadline. Ryan, it was your first time as a DCR colleague attending such an event. How did you find it? What are the kind of key takeaways?
Yeah, so I've been to events like this before. Obviously, from an industry perspective, I was here with DCR from a consultancy perspective, and I think it was one really interesting hear some of the speakers. So I think some of the key trends were surrounding around, from moving from compliance to culture, and how do we embed operational resilience within firms moving past that March 2025 deadline. There were some broader themes as well around AI. How do we, one, manage the risks around AI, but also how do we use that as an opportunity as internal sort of risk and resilience professionals within firms as well. And there were lots of other themes surrounding the event, but again, more broadly, speakers throughout the day, and we had a stand and we engaged with loads of different professionals across the financial services industry. So yeah, Roger, I'm interested to hear your perspective on it and how you thought the day went as well.
The day was on the backdrop of quite a large sporting weekend, quite notably the boxing.
Yes.
And there was quite a few sporting analogies that came out, specifically the one around Mike Tyson's. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's really true for the resilience space. More and more organisations need to be moving past just having static plans to something that's a bit more dynamic and actually going deep in terms of levels of testing and exercising. It was interesting, the point you made about compliance. There was a really strong comment that's resonated and stuck with me, which is about compliance as a consequence, not the driver. So we've now moved past the deadline, and if all your firm has done is check the box and aim for a compliance deadline, guess what? You're leaving a whole load of risk that's there. The reverse of that, I think compliance as a consequence should be tapered with confidence as an outcome. So how do we build confidence in our resilience position, but how do we use it as a platform for growth? I think growth was a key part of lots of the conversations that were taking place.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on that point as well. There was in one of the presentations, it was talking about the roadmap beyond 2025. So what does resilience within firms look like from 2025 over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And they spoke about everything from when does it become a strategic enabler? So when does resilience become something that firms really focus on to differentiate themselves from competitors? So are they seen as a company that is up more than their competitors in essence? Yeah.
And I think to address that, there's a lot of talk around cultural change, because it's very often easy to see once you've met a compliance deadline that actually we'll move on to the newest, biggest, shiniest thing. And actually there's a lack of then focus on that thing that's just been delivered. And I think resilience is one of those things. So everyone has met the March 31st deadline. And there's quite a lot of conversation that was on. We didn't quite feel the champagne popping. There's a bit of an anticlimax at that point. So what comes next? And I think resilience teams and organisations that are putting resilience at the heart of change are the ones that probably stand the best chance of embedding it and also being successful. We see nowadays more and more things are playing out on social media, and so we can see that an organisation who is super high profile, their position in the market can almost tumble overnight with an incident that occurs. So it's embedding that change early on to make sure that resilience is considered early on.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a point made as well towards one of the end of the talks around sort of the return on investment. So resilience or risk functions or central functions are usually considered to be a cost center, right? They've been a cost center, and how do you keep that momentum up over the next 5, 10, 15 years, where boards really understand that this is not just a cost center, but this is potentially going to either save you money or stop really adverse events or help prevent really adverse events happening within their organization. And there was a really key comment, and which I think encapsulated this, which was around, no CEO or board member on this planet wants a not unresilient organization or company, right? I think that's a way to maybe articulate it, that it needs to be a driving factor within decision making at the sort of the highest level within organizations.
I totally agree. And again, there's some interesting conversations that are occurring around how do you shift from static reporting and MI to something that's meaningful. Have you got any perspectives on that?
Yeah, so again, I think if we take it back to the sort of very, very principles of how do we measure resilience, right? So we've been through a whole process over the past, well, since the regulation came out. And actually, I think it comes down to testing. So how do you move from a sort of judgment-based scenario testing formula to having scenario testing which is far more sort of based on data, evidence, tangible metrics that you can take to your, whether it's your boards or your exco, and say, look, that this is what we've done, this is what we've mapped, this is what we understand about our business, and we've tested it, and this has been the outcome, right? And these are our gaps, these are our vulnerabilities moving forward. So if you've got really real sort of tangible data, evidence and metrics that you can take to the board rather than slightly more subjective outputs, I think that will help in that engagement and that momentum.
I think testing and exercising was one of the key things that came out in several of the talks. Yeah. It's how do you build depth of experience across the organisation? Again, back to the cultural point. I think a lot of companies are thinking about ways of training and testing, exercising their staff in slightly different ways. So moving from large-scale exercises into something a bit more dynamic and engaging with third parties.
Yeah, and what do you think, Raj, on that sort of third-party piece? Do you think organisations have understand that in its entirety yet, or do you think there's a lot more work to be done there?
I think there's a huge amount of work to be done, and again, I think that's one of the other big topics that came out of the day. Third party isn't going away; it's becoming an increasingly hot topic for the fact that we all rely on our supply chains. The supply chains are becoming more and more important. No one organisation can do and deliver all services. So the harsh reality is we have to use partners, we have to use third parties. And guess what? So those third parties also have third parties. So it's a constant cycle of how do we get the assurance? And again, the challenge for a lot of the companies in the room was how much is enough and how far do we go? How do we leverage the data? How mature do we want to be? I think we're all trying to grapple with that question.
Yeah, and I think building on that third party piece as well, it's about, if possible, can you include some of your critical third parties in that testing, right? So can you ensure that your scenario testing or your crisis exercising is including relevant scenario examples that relate to third parties, or even trying to get some participants from third parties to ensure that cross collaboration of organisations, but also just getting an understanding from their perspective of how their views on the world, their views on resilience, their views on your relationship between the organisations and their third parties.
Ryan, you've been a kind of strong proponent of sort of combined assurance and integrated assurance with regards to sort of testing and exercising. What's your view on that?
Yeah, so again, I think when we think about testing, and we think about the journey that's been on in most organisations, they've started off at probably single service scenario testing. So looking at an important business service and going, right, can that service recover within X time within their impact tolerances and a sort of a list of scenarios, and that's matured over time, right, where you start to do sort of more multi-layered, complex scenarios. But that only gives a certain level of assurance. And within organisations, you have various types of testing that go on within the cyberspace, the ITDR space, within finance, whether that's sort of financial stability or financial resilience testing. But can you get a really holistic picture by bringing together those sort of silos within an organisation, doing sort of integrated testing to get a full assurance picture across the organisation? And I think that's a hard challenge to solve, but I think it's one that organisations will increasingly look to do over the next couple of years as they mature.
So Ryan, I guess one of the things that we've all been talking about is, so what's next? So the compliance deadline's been and gone, we've moved on. What's next? What should people be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it comes down to organisational context, right? Some organisations will have been thinking about resilience for far longer than some others. Take the example of a large investment bank will have been, pushing resilience activities probably before the actual regulation came out, and they will be far more mature, whereas maybe a smaller fintech or a smaller building society might not have been doing that. And I think it comes down to where are you within that journey, right? those that are very mature will be thinking about how do we embed our resilience functions or resilience as an outcome across the whole organisation, right? Maybe against having a sort of federated model where you've got a central resilience team driving this, where actually resilience becomes just part of the core of the organisation, where sort of every employee thinks about this, every sort of operational leader, every function leader thinks about resilience as a sort of core enabler of their part of the business. I would say secondly, we can't stay away from testing and exercising. It's the only tangible output that you have from all of the activity that you do, right? So it's apart from having a live incident, testing and exercising is the only place where you're going to get a level of assurance that the things, the activities that you've been doing and the plans that you've put in place actually tangibly work. It's about testing those plans, making sure that you've got the right people on those leadership teams, so when things do happen, which they will, that you've got the right people in the right positions to be able to respond effectively. And then finally, I would say, just looking at the organisation as a whole, have we thought about how technology can help in our resilience preparation? So thinking about whether that's very topical, but AI, but also broadly just how different integrations across the organisation, whether that's technology integrations and the like, can help in that, whether that's resilience preparation or whether that's planning or whether that's just monitoring of certain risks or vulnerabilities. So I'd say they're probably the three things from my perspective.
I would agree completely with everything that you just said there. I'd probably add two additional elements. One was around shifting the organisation left. That's a term that's commonly been used in software development for a long time, but it's moving teams, individuals, groups within the organisation to think about resilience from the outset. So when you're actually doing strategic planning roadmaps for the organisation over a 2-year, 3-year period, where does resilience play a part in that? And so some of that is thinking about what is the outcome and the effect you're trying to drive within the organisation. So if you're a 24/7 business and you need uptime that's high availability, you need to be thinking about building that in through your infrastructure, redundancy and resilience from the outset. The other thing for me, which is playing to the cultural piece, is how do you do things differently? We've, as resilience professionals or individuals that worked in business continuity, gone through tried and tested mechanisms for upskilling people. Now we live in a time which is quite highly pressured.
Yep.
We're all time short. Our attention spans aren't there as much as they used to be. So how can we actually leverage technology, learning styles to do something slightly different, where people start to understand what to do in a crisis or in a major incident? I think why that becomes important is we're all very different. So if I wake up at 2:00 in the morning because of an incident, my natural style might be very different to yours. One might be very analytical versus one that's responding by gut feel. And there's got to be advancements in the way that we train and prepare people for an incident, so that actually becomes muscle memory. I'm not sure there's much in the way of solutions capabilities that are addressing that, and I think that will have the biggest impact, because actually we're trying to get people to do things differently. And I guess the reason for that, and the final thing I'd say, is businesses are run by people for people. And if you take the people out of it, actually you're not going to be able to respond to an incident or a major crisis or build resilience into the organisation.
100%.